Hey, Sam, you come up with that intro line?
You didn't tell me that was today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Writer's Room with Sam and Jim. This is the show where we bring aspiring writers into our little writer's room on the air here to help them work on and develop their story. And we're going to do that with Campy Draper in just a minute. But first, we've got a special guest rant today. JR wants to go off about something. JR, what you got?
All right, Jim, I want to talk about representation in TV.
All right, let's do it.
As a Latino, I get so excited when I see us on screen. It's just the best thing. And I'm not talking about stories about crossing the border, or I'm not talking about stories where we have no money and are constantly getting taken down by the different factors that make life difficult. But what I'm talking about are shows like Mozart in the Jungle, where you've got a main character, Rodrigo, who is Mexican. Everything he does is inspired in his character by being Mexican. But when he steps up on that conducting stage, he is a conductor.
Right.
And I think it's so important to me to see him succeeding in that way. It's Latin excellence, and that's something that really excites me.
Right, because you don't necessarily conduct differently because you're Mexican. You conduct like a conductor.
And nobody treats him with kid gloves because he's a Mexican conductor. Right. Nobody's pretending that he got there because of affirmative action. Nobody's pretending that he's anything less but excellent at his job.
So you're looking for representation of real life.
Exactly. I don't want to see that television exaggeration. I want to see real life represented, and I want to see us on screen in that real way.
And I think that's part of the problem, right? Like, we're in the midst of a storm of sorts of people trying to figure out how do we do this? How are we going to represent historically underrepresented points of view in TV and film, right? And yet, most of what gets represented in TV film has always been sort of distorted and exaggerated, whatever it was representing.
Right. And a lot of people want to tell stories that are big and epic, but the only thing they can think of is this horrible strife that our people have been through.
Oh, let's do another Latino drug gang.
Right. But we'll take New Mexico, for example, because I've got a lot of family there. Meth has just run rampant. And you can tell a story about drug gangs and drug dealers and selling meth and how that destroys a community. But within those communities, there's still people who just want to fall in love. They want to meet their husband or wife. They want to have kids. They want to build a life. And these things just color their experience. It's a small town experience.
Right.
There's not a lot of economic opportunity, but at the heart of it are people who just want the same thing that we all do.
Well, it's like that new series, Taika Waititi, right? Reservation Dogs.
Yes, Reservation Dogs. That I am so psyched for this show. I saw the first episode, and I just absolutely loved it. It's about kids striving to do better. They're dealing with the loss of a friend, and they're dealing with a town on a reservation that doesn't have a lot of opportunity for them. But at the heart of this is a story about a young boy that just wants to fight to make a better life. And that is thrilling to me.
Yeah, because that's the thing. At the end of the day, like we fight for representation and diversity so that the details are right and the stories are true to different communities. But at the same time, the actual human experience is always kind of the same. It's your hopes and dreams and fears and like everywhere.
I mean, we've seen so many stories where it's people of color who are getting beat down. But what about the people of color that are falling in love? What about the people of color that just want to be better than their parents were? What about the people of color that want to create a better life for their children?
You know, it's funny. That used to be like the indie movie sensibility, right? And I think that's an interesting door that's opened with all the streaming services. Is there's a certain latitude now to tell more stories that are different than just the quote unquote network headline, more distorted version of things.
And that's something I could not be more excited for.
There you go, JR. Okay, let's get into this week's show.
Hello, Campy. This is Sam. How are you?
Good. I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Nice to meet you. This is Jim.
Nice to meet you.
I'm afraid to ask about your name because I feel like, this poor bastard, everybody asks him about his name.
It'd be a great name in a script for sure.
Yeah, well, here's the thing about my name and me. I love to talk about myself, so it's fine.
Wait, are you sure you're not an actor?
I used to do stand-up. I was bad at it. Switched to writing. I've worn a lot of creative hats. But yeah, my name's Campy, which is actually, my middle name is Campion, and my first name is William. And every man on my dad's side of the family whose first name is William goes by their middle name. So it's like my dad named me William Campion with the intent to just call me Campy my whole life. So that's how it ended up being my first name, not real first name.
And it worked. And, you know, I have to tell you, that's going to look great on the screen someday when you become a TV writer. And I remember that there was always, I used to watch Law & Order SVU all the time because, well, I liked the show a lot, and then I only stopped because I had kids. That's why Jim stopped.
It got very difficult.
And then you're like, okay, I really can't do child rape every single week. But there was a woman on there, and her name was Dawn DeNoon. Dawn DeNoon. And I just thought that was such a cool name. And, of course, I did see it, 40 or 50 episodes that I'd seen, or they're up to like, I don't even...
billion.
So, and then years later, after all the stuff that we've talked about in the show, I ended up in a room with her.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and she was I think she had 40 credits on that show as
43
as a writer.
Episodes she'd written.
And of course she was a producer and all that on all the rest of, or many of the rest of them, and that was very exciting. She had a very memorable name, and then I met her, and that is the totality of the story. There's no turn. She didn't turn out to be a human, not a human or a terrible person.
Right. Except that every fantasy you've ever had about residuals on Law & Order, yeah, they're true.
Right.
They're 100% true.
It's all fact.
Sounds like she's doing well for herself.
No, it's true.
She's doing well for about 7 people, I think.
Yeah. Right.
So anyway, back to you, Campy. Before we get into your show, I'm really interested. JR's little bio that he did with you. You were actually bedridden for a while.
Off and on.
What I like about that. Let me tell you what I like.
That sounds
I'll
awesome.
tell you what I loved about it. Yeah.
The reason I love it, I don't, but the reason I thought it was so interesting is that you had asthma attacks from your mother smoking. So was your mother's addiction putting you in bed? And if so, how great is that for a TV writer? Or a writer of any kind.
Right, yeah. To say I have mother issues is an understatement. No, yeah, I definitely was sick quite a lot growing up. I just don't think the connection was ever made, really. I mean, I think my dad always was pretty hard on her. My parents got divorced, and so he was hard on her from hundreds of miles away. I would spend, and I also learned another contributing factor was I'm allergic to Christmas trees. So around Christmas time every year, I was done for the count. Yeah.
So no smoking, no Christmas. You're just no fun at all. Is that what you're saying?
I'm allergic to cats. I'm allergic to stone fruits. But I am not one of those sickly people. I just have learned to avoid the things that are my kryptonite.
Can we just deal with how sad it is to be allergic to Christmas, though? Why is the only Jew here so sad?
That's a movie. I'm allergic to Christmas.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
I have another sad Christmas anecdote from my childhood. I was never below the poverty line, but I was pretty close to it a lot of times. Not me. It wasn't my fault for not working. I was a child, but my family.
Says you.
And, yeah, right. Yeah, it was my hands just weren't delicate enough to fit into the machines. No, but yeah, my mom on occasion would, in order to decorate the Christmas tree, take our toys and tie strings to them. So our old toys would be hung on the Christmas tree as ornaments because she couldn't afford ornaments, and then we'd get a couple new toys for ornament making the next year, I guess.
Whatever issues you have with your mother, I think you need to thank her. For giving you,
she has given you a great gift.
She has given you the gift of poverty and abuse. And illness.
Loving neglect.
Abuse. Yeah. Loving neglect. Yeah,
loving neglect. Whatever it was, just thank her for that because that. Yeah. Oh my God, and then I find, one of our superpowers in a writer's room, I think everybody has them, but our particular one, it's not talent, obviously, if you've heard the show. It's that. We came out of the restaurant world, and so we were just used to working brutal hours, very hard, and we were the owners, so we couldn't try to get out of shit because there was no one else to do it.
Right, and your restaurants weren't successful enough for you to screw off.
Well, they became that way, but in the beginning, and the screwing off we did was we went to Jim's house and wrote. But but in the beginning, no, we were working 12+ plus hours every day, 7 days a week, 6 days a week, and on Sunday it would be a half day in the beginning, and so which was a regular 8-hour day. So and so we got into writers' rooms. We're like, I don't care how much we work. This is nothing. We still have that built in a little bit. But your superpower is you're going to be, well, at least I'm not in bed listening to everyone enjoy Christmas while I am trying to breathe.
While I wheeze.
Right. And look, people are being nice to me, giving me food, and we're coming up with ideas.
Absolutely.
So speaking of ideas, Campy, let's get into your show. Tell us about your show.
The show is pretty early in the development phase. I definitely have enough to talk about for sure. The log line I tentatively have in place right now is when an anxious, true crime obsessed woman is hired to produce her own podcast in a very strange town, she must race to unravel the mysteries of a surreal and supernatural missing persons cold case before she becomes one herself. The idea behind the show is it's kind of drawing a little bit off of a pivotal point in my life, not when I was a podcaster or solving mysteries. That's just more sort of a structure with to hang an A story. I moved from college to Vancouver, Canada for 3 years, and I had just gone through my first real significant sort of adult heartbreak. And I was in a period of sort of self-discovery, and I just moved to a city where I didn't know anybody except for one person. And that allowed me to do a lot of self-discovery and defining myself. So I kind of want this story to be about this heroine. So I tend to write heroines because I was raised by my mom and around my sister. So I kind of identify more often with women than men. But the heroine is sort of like in this period of self-discovery. She has this goal of producing this true crime podcast, but she's also going through a process of trying to figure out what she's all about. And unlike me, or hopefully unlike me, she's kind of doing it in an unhealthy way. She's doing it kind of get back at this guy who things ended badly with. So she's sort of trapped in his definition of who she should be at first, and then hopefully will sort of come into her own definition of herself.
So I want to dig into that, but I want to ask you, first of all, I think this idea has an engine and it has legs, and it's going to work. And that's
agree.
That's not even my opinion. That's not even my opinion.
It's almost a demonstrable fact.
It is a demonstrable fact because we worked on a show now called
Truth Be Told.
Truth Be Told, which was this Octavia Spencer show
for Apple.
For Apple Plus, and where she has a podcast. Now, I want to say your log line. By the way, it's not supernatural at all, and there's only the engine is a little overlappy, and I don't mean this to be
there's no conflict.
There's no conflict, but and because of the development process, it actually kind of got away from her podcast is about her investigation, which I thought. And when we came in for just 7 weeks to help, and then we had to go to another show, but we've played in the sandbox before.
Right. The basic premise of that show was that she had done a podcast years before investigating a guy and basically saying this guy was guilty of murder, and now the question comes up, is he really guilty? And she goes back to re-examine it.
Right.
So different motives, different everything.
She was doing the podcast in the current time show. I think she was a journalist before, but regardless, we totally understand this structure.
That's great.
and I really think it works because I know what she's doing. She's making a show, and also she's being public with it, like every journalist is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow it's more personal when it's spoken than when it's written. Right?
And you have that great opportunity for, even if she doesn't know a lot of people, because she's recording her own thoughts and feelings in this investigation, she can record stuff and then decide not to air it, but still be venting things from inside herself in ways that are expositive for the audience. And it's
right.
Good.
Right. And
it allows you to get in her head without cheating too much.
Yeah.
Or it is a cheat, whichever you want to call it.
Now, the biggest divergence here is either that, first of all, she's investing something supernatural. That's a pretty big divergence. The other one is it's a half-hour dramedy, and the one with Octavia was
anything but a dramedy.
It was not half-hour, and it was not a dramedy for sure. So So let's talk. Before we find out how it's a dramedy. First of all, what's her name?
Her name is Iris.
Okay. So what does Iris not know about herself that she's going to find out?
Oh, that's a great question. What does she not know about herself that she's going to find out? Like, you mean in the pilot or in the series?
Whichever. I mean, what does this reveal to her? Because clearly she's going to learn things about herself and change here.
Right? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know if this is a real answer to the question, but I've been doing a lot of thinking about her over the last couple of days. And the original conception was she was a bit more like me. I'm a late bloomer, I talk a lot, but I'm a bit shy about my true self and my feelings and stuff like that. And I was going to have her be very anxious, which is why that word is in the log line. But I've recently sort of realized it's kind of better if she's coming into the show overcorrecting for that, because she's trying to be the opposite of who her true self is.
Good.
And so she's coming in, the first two scenes in my head, one is the one where she gets hired and her boss is like, okay, I'm going to let you run with this ball, but don't screw it up. And then the next one is she goes to this guy that she's been having an affair with. He's with a girlfriend and he's just broken up with her, and Iris thinks, now's my chance. I'm going to get this guy to go with me to this weird town and we're going to finally be together. And he's like, I'm going to be a rock star. You're not a rock star's girlfriend, basically. And so she course corrects by trying too hard to be a rock star's girlfriend, but on her own. And so kind of what she's learning is how to find the balance between the rock star's girlfriend, which is kind of a false construct of who she wants to be, and who she used to be, which is like the weirdo audio tech nerd who wears like the hood to coast hoodie every day, and find the sort of balance there of like actually believing in who she used to be and, forging a path forward that's.
Two questions for you. One is, if she's anxious, it feels like there's some underlying thing that she's not confident about or that she's afraid of.
Yeah.
And then my second question that may or may not tie into that is, the show has a supernatural element. Does that play into her journey of self-discovery? Is there a way in which the supernatural is affecting the course of her understanding of herself?
So the way I've thought of the supernatural element of the show is it's a bit like if you're going to take a spectrum between like the Fargo TV show where sort of surreal things happen, especially like in seasons 2 and 3, like, I don't know, Twin Peaks as the extreme other end of the spectrum. This is somewhere in the middle. And so this town is sort of like, I haven't nailed down the mythology because that's not useful until you figure out everything else. But the sort of archetype of the town is that it's just like, it's a weirdo magnet, and it's a weirdo magnet on a supernatural and sci-fi level. And so it's really the setting that's supernatural. It's nothing to do with her. She doesn't have powers or anything like that. She's not like the special activated chosen one or anything like that.
But we do need that setting to be somehow the worst thing that's happened to her, or
right.
It's got to be not exactly that, though. That's one version, but that it has to have a special relationship to her. Not in the way in Haven, a show that I've heard some things about. But the thing about Haven was she didn't know that she was connected to this place, and she discovered it. Now that's
right.
Classic tropey TV, right? I'm not down on that.
That should be a channel or a streaming thing. Tropey TV.
I'm pretty sure it is, but I do not want to name that network.
We might be working there next week.
Right, exactly. So that worked because the big reveal there is her connection to the town, all that kind of stuff, and that everyone loved it, and it lasted for not everyone. Everyone did not love it. 3 million people in America loved it, and it went 6 seasons. So my question is, in this thing, how is this supernatural thing going to affect her?
Right. Well, I think the way the supernatural works is that every third person she's talking to is somehow linked to the supernatural, in that like they might be an alien who's been living in this town for 10 years or things along that line. And they're all weirdos. And she starts to be pushed to be her more sort of authentic self. But I guess that's a one I would need to drill down on a little bit more to give maybe a slightly more satisfying answer to that. But that
I think pretty much
dynamic.
Every answer is going to be more satisfying than that one, because you know you're bullshitting when you sit there. And by the way, I've been there where you're just like, keep talking until I figure it out. I think that's something we got to figure out, though. I think that's
sure. Yeah.
There is something in the idea of how people present versus who they are and what the truth about them is. That's interesting in her own personal journey of like trying to figure out who she really is, and how she presents to the world, and these people and what they might really be and how they're presenting to the world.
Well, that's the base level that I'm connecting to it on a sort of personal level, because that's sort of like the stand-in for all the friends I made in Vancouver. It's like they were all very unique individuals, and I really took a lot of lessons about who I could be from befriending them. But I do think that you're right. Maybe the mythology level of the show needs to be sort of organically grown more in order to sort of see where she's at.
Not a lot more. Not a lot more. By the way, it could be, if you go back to Haley Joel Osment, he could see dead people. We never knew why.
Mm-hmm.
He just could.
Yeah.
Right. And you could say, and now in TV, an executive is going to ask you basically, why can he see these people? And you don't have to, you can say, well, by the show, and I'll tell you. But I'm not going. We're not going to reveal that to the end of season 1. But she's got to have like a sensitivity to them. There's got to be something, even in Medium. I can't remember what it was in Medium where she could see the dead people and they came to her, and I don't remember why. I didn't watch that show very much. But there's always a connection of some kind, and it doesn't have to be mythological. It can be. It was in Haven, but that'll give us.
It could be practical. It could be just who she is as a person.
Yeah.
Always feeling like an outsider and disconnected. Makes her sensitive to these people, and so she connects with them.
Or she does. She connects with one of them in a way that is core to her thing, and then word gets out, and now she gets drawn into that because of, and so it could be an emotional connection and not supernatural. But we just that's an important thing to understand a little bit of, I think, in the pilot. You think so, Jim?
Yeah. It's the why here, why now, right? Like there's the story part of it, which I like, the podcast, the missing person case, all that stuff is all sort of functional. But why here for the character? Why does it matter to her? Is the other big piece there. And
then the question is, what doesn't she know about herself? That is that part, is that she, if you go mythologically, obviously she doesn't know. I mean, in our show, it was, she doesn't know, this character, Audrey Parker, doesn't know that she actually has been coming to this town for hundreds of years or longer. But in your show, it could also be what she doesn't know about herself is that she doesn't really think she's good at anything, but she's really good at this. And she learns that. So it's a character thing. And I think that's a little weak tea, but that's where I would start and see if I could, I'd pitch that and see if Jim could do something with that.
Anything. God, please do anything with that.
Yeah.
But we want to make her essential, and it has to be her. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I do think she sort of has a bit of a bullshit detector and is sort of able to call people out when they're not being true themselves, which is kind of like that twist of irony in her character that, she isn't being authentic to herself.
Why does she have that bullshit detector?
Well, I think it's tied to so I have this whole theory about wounds, she had, which is a pretty common writer term, but usually they say, your character has a wound and that informs their lie about themselves. My friend and I have this sort of theory about people actually have two wounds. They have a very early formative wound, and then they have usually a more recent wound that sort of echoes that one, that sort of aggravates it. And so the boyfriend thing of rejecting her, her wound is that she's constantly rejected and humiliated, and her father didn't accept her unless she was being excellent, and in many ways so she took the opposite tack of well, I don't need to impress you, and could see he was sort of more of a grifter type character, and so she could kind of see through his bullshit. It's I don't need your approval, but secretly,
Well, I really like that. So the idea that is this her father? Is that what you said, her father?
Mm-hmm.
So this guy's totally untrustworthy, and she doesn't trust him. So consequently, her bullshit detector is advanced. That makes sense. That makes sense. And there's something interesting and simple about that. And if you're worried about it being too tropey, too easy, too obvious, it's probably perfect.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
That's called human nature.
Well, right. And you're going to funk it up anyway, because you're going to layer on details on it, right? I mean, the whole thing that Iris, you said, is she goofy?
Yeah, she's a bit out there. I think her goofiness has always been an understated part of her personality, but now she's trying to put it a little bit too on Front Street, maybe.
Mm-hmm. The question, you said it's a dramedy. So what makes it funny?
I think the humor will come from two sources. One, I tend to write characters where the humor comes from them. So it comes through in dialogue, the way they react to situations. It's not humorous in a sort of sitcom-y situational sense. Mm-hmm. But then I really have a love for shows that incorporate the surreal, these offbeat moments, oddball characters, or just things that sort of happen, and just the juxtaposition of that with the mundane.
No, that's all great, but I'm going to go ahead and channel Iris's bullshit detector and call bullshit on that.
Okay.
Because that's all true, but then you know what I really like? I really like well-written, tight, thrillery, but kind of funny, and I mean, that's all true. We all love that stuff. In this show, your show, what's going to be funny, specifically?
And you can not know yet.
Yeah.
If you don't know.
If you don't know, that's fine.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, to me, usually when I say I'm setting out to make this script funny, it comes out in the dialogue. It comes out in the scene. So
okay, well, hold on a second though.
I guess that's not funny.
No, that's good. But now you're doing that thing where you're going to screw yourself, because then you're going to sit down and write and say, okay, I got to write dialogue that's funny, or it's got to come out of the scene. How the hell do I do that? And so you're screwing future you, right? So let's unscrew future you.
It's always the conflict between people's beliefs or attitudes and reality.
Mm-hmm. So let's dig in, if you don't mind. Let's just dig into Iris for just a second, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
And let's figure out. So we're in this place now where, okay, you want it to come out of character, so it's got to be her character.
Mm-hmm.
So let's make things hard for her, right? Let's make her uncomfortable. So what about this place, Campy, is uncomfortable? Is it Seacouver? Is that what the name of it is?
Seacouver?
Seacouver.
Yeah.
I was explaining to JR, Seacouver is the name of the fictional city that Adrian Paul lives in the Highlander TV show.
Nice.
It was shot in Vancouver, but they wanted it to be set in America. But they didn't shoot it as Seattle or anything like that. Right. They just let it look like Vancouver. So they called it Seacouver. And so I was always obsessed with that little bit of trivia. So when I was coming up with the name of this town, that's a filler name. So
right. That's great. Let's use it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so when she gets there, going back to Haven, only because there's some overlap here, but when she comes in, we always see her, she's a hard-charging FBI detective, and she meets, the town is represented by the man that she meets, which is Nathan, the local cop. Right. And they obviously go on to have a very intense relationship, romantic and otherwise, but it's all about she's fast, she talks fast, she wants to get shit done, and he's laconic, and he's more of a rural, small-town kind of guy.
A little bit wry.
Right. And he drives her crazy, but then, of course, they also have that magic connection, both literally and figuratively. So what is she going to be confronted with? And that's my question that's going to make it. For example, is it, is it fish out of water? Is it that she offends everybody she ever meets? Which is when I moved to Minnesota and I was coming out of New York and I didn't know how to
moderate much of anything.
I was pissing off everybody right and left except Jim, who was laughing at me. So I had to learn to moderate it. Is that her? I mean, these are like, I'm just throwing things, digging in the bag and throwing them up in the air.
Totally. Yeah, so what I have so far as like who she's bouncing off of and causing problems for her, other than just, typical obstacles in the A story of figuring out this mystery, sort of on the B story side, the sort of personal side, she meets a bartender, and the bartender is just like totally comfortable in his skin, and she's a bit intense because she's like really trying to do a good job, and she's like kind of interrogating him like as if it was, a D&D game. It's like, go to the barkeep and find out all the, what's going on in this town. And he's just like, you need to slow down. And his comfort in her skin kind of disarms her. And she's also, as you would guess, probably she's interested in him sort of initially like on a romantic level. Then a complication that comes along is that her friend from high school has moved to this town years ago, and she didn't know that. So they run into each other. And so while she's in this town trying to sort of redefine herself and be this new version of herself, a person from her past actually comes along and throws a monkey wrench in that by saying like, you were never like that. What are you doing?
That's gold. I really love that.
I do too.
The contrast between those things, which it's kind of, we're getting towards my other big question here. The stuff we know from the basics you've given us is all kind of backstory, right? Like she was like this, she broke up with the guy, now she's come to the town, and it's can you talk just a little bit about the basic beats of the story once she gets to town? Like how does it proceed for her? What does it look like for her to be in this town? What is she doing?
So she has sort of one lead, and I haven't figured out exactly how she got in this one piece of information because I just came up with it today. So the sort of A story dramatic question for the pilot is she's trying to get an interview with she's investigating this missing persons case. The guy who's missing is named Gabe, and he also moved to this town and sort of has sort of a self-discovery thing that's going on that comes out throughout the investigation that mirrors her thematically. But Gabe went missing, and she wants to talk to Steve, who is the last person who saw Gabe before he disappeared. So it's not a murder case per se, but a lot of people presume he's dead. And so she's trying to talk to Steve. And what she has is two conflicting pieces of information. She has a statement from Steve that Steve told the police that they had this big argument in public public. Steve told the police that Gabe threatened him, and that the records of this were all sealed, but Iris has somehow gotten this unsealed version of this. And then the second piece of information she has is an article from the same time. And in this article, Steve told the reporter that he was the one who threatened Gabe. So there's this public argument and there's a disconnect over who threatened who. And so she goes to Steve to try and figure out which one's true, and he doesn't want to talk to her at all, shuts her down. So then she starts investigating around town. I haven't figured out the details of that yet, but basically she finds two pieces of information. One, she locks down the information that it was actually Gabe who threatened Steve. Hopefully this isn't too much info dump at you guys. But
let me pause you there.
Sure.
It kind of is. It's a lot of plot.
Right.
So
yeah.
And so let's find the character in it, right?
Yeah.
And then go through it.
Well, I was going to say let's if you can quickly get to the end. Like, where does the story go? Like, so she finds a couple pieces of information, and then
what she basically uncovers is that Gabe and Steve were in a romantic relationship. Steve was married to another man. So she thinks, I think Steve killed Gabe because he was causing trouble in his marriage, gonna expose the affair, and now I have all the information, I can confront him with it. And when she goes to Steve again with all the information, Steve grants an interview for the podcast, and he admits that, no, my husband knew we were together and approved of our love because we're in an open relationship. And I was lying to the reporters because I wanted to protect Gabe's reputation. He had becoming more and more erratic in the months leading up to his disappearance. And I didn't want the reporters digging into it. So I said I threatened him, and that sort of put an end to the story. And that's kind of where it ends on the A story.
Okay.
Well, you asked for it, so what do you want to do with that, Jim?
Well, I'm just curious to know because all right, so there's nothing supernatural has shown up in an overt way, right?
So it's more of a slow burn of the supernatural. The other pieces of information, which is a bit plotty, is that Gabe worked at this lab that's in town that is
No, hold on.
Only if the lab is the source of the supernatural stuff. Is it?
It's tied into it. It's one of the factions that are obsessed with the supernatural aspect of the town.
I mean, I'm seeing it's just a lot of moves. I'm not getting
it. I don't think you're looking at it right, Sam, because what he's setting up what is in effect a mystery, right? And she's drifted in this town with a bunch of weird people, and in the course of the pilot, she discovers, oh wait, there's a weird lab in town that seems to be up to some weird shit, and I'm guessing the other clue is also something weird.
Yeah, she discovers through actually talking to Steve, who was the only one close enough to Gabe, that Gabe was basically sort of Lovecraftian, losing his mind towards the end. So he was talking to other people in the town and associating with people that Steve didn't approve of. And those are sort of forward throws.
So then do we get any glimpse of anything to reinforce that sort of Lovecraftian, otherworldly something going on in a directly experienced way? Yeah, I think that there will be characters who are sort of interested in talking to Iris, who sort of have this sort of mesmerism about them. I don't know. It's a bit of like how it'll be expressed. This is going to sound like total bullshit to you guys, but it's about how it's going to work on the scene level on the page, which is one of the strangers she talks to in town. I have penciled out is a guy who is like kind of an energy vampire, and that'll be a strange encounter that she gets rescued from, that she doesn't know she's being rescued from, by the bartender guy that she likes. I guess what I'm wondering is, I feel like you're going for a slow burn here and you're hiding the ball. And that's good in a lot of ways. I feel like you need to unhide one ball, right? Yeah. Not to be too graphic or potentially misunderstood there, but but if it's the energy vampire, say, right, like she has to like come out of this saying, "What the fuck is going on?" And the bartender saying, "What are you talking about?" She's very much weirded out, but I also plan for it to be the sort of Hitchcockian bomb under the table. The audience knows that there's weird shit going on, but she's sort of not totally 100% on top of it. Yeah, I'm just looking for it to be overt for the audience to understand that there actually is weird shit going on in some way.
I like that the supernatural is tied into the central mystery, which it is, and that it has to be. The idea that a dead man or missing man who's Steve. Is he the missing one or Gabe? Gabe. Gabe's the missing one. That they were in a relationship. Great. Classic relationship we didn't know, forbidden for whatever reason, in this case forbidden not because they're actually gay but because one's married and it was a secret. So that stuff works. I think that's simple. Now we just have to have the supernatural thing be more than just it's coming out of this factory. What are we seeing along the way, right? We need to land that, and then we got to get back to the character and the emotional soul of it, which I don't see yet. I don't know why it matters to her. Any of this matters to her yet. But that's what I'm going to be.
Which is where, back when we were talking about what's her connection to this place, and we said, it doesn't have to be because she has a tie to it, but there is always the answer of it does in some way have a tie to it, or her dad was once here, or whatever the hell.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, I'm open to that stuff too. I just haven't gotten too bogged, like I said, into mythology, because I've been just trying to figure out what her hang up is, her lie about herself and the way she needs to navigate the world. And I do think that occurred, maybe not a satisfying answer, so I would love to get a more satisfying one if it doesn't work. But to me, she's driven to impress her boss, who, a little bit lost in this is her boss is a well-known true crime podcaster who basically got this deal to produce a bunch of different shows, of which this is one of them. And this is her chance at having, a big breakthrough career. And
why does she need that chance?
Yeah, what does she want?
Well, I think it ties back to what I was saying about her dad, which is like, unless she was excelling, he didn't care about her and wasn't rejecting her. And so it's a bit of, I need to be excellent. I can't be myself. I need to be excellent. I need to be more in order to be loved.
Right. Well, the dad serves the purpose of that she doesn't trust anybody, or she can see past bullshit. So I'm worried that she also revered the dad, wanted to please him. I guess that can exist in one person, but he's off camera, so it's hard.
Right, yeah.
It's hard to...
It's kind of the same with the thing with the boyfriend. Like, whatever the boyfriend is rejecting about her, she's having a reaction to that.
Off camera.
Right.
So all I got, the thing is, we're circling it. I mean, I can see it.
Right, yeah.
But the question is...
The basic milieu is really good.
Yeah, it's got all these elements, but they're all sitting next to each other, although we don't have the element of her personality. That I don't have yet. Personally, I don't see it. But once we get that, then we'll know what to keep or toss out of everything else. Because she's the most important thing.
And it's that, in the classic, I feel like we've done several different supernatural dramedies or dramas in recent episodes. And it's a trope, right? Like the character comes into town and falls into a supernatural situation and is now on a quest for their mother or their father or whatever it is, right? There's some tie to the supernatural thing. And, well, it doesn't have to be that and preferably isn't just because it's been done a lot.
Right.
But there needs to be some connection, like there's the Mulder and Scully thing where she is desperate to believe in the supernatural or is desperate to disbelieve in the supernatural and is running into it. There's some chemistry between her and the supernatural in this town, and I feel like that needs to be a linchpin here. It's either the specific fact that the supernatural is giving her.
All right, I got a pitch.
Right.
I got a pitch.
Okay.
All right, so let me see if I can sort of crack this open, because I'm still floundering a little bit, and maybe I will be after this pitch too. I want to make it more extreme for her. She feels too soft. I'm not interested yet. It's a lot of mealy mouth stuff, which, by the way, totally normal. But sometimes you got to be a little more.
My process.
Well, right. Well, yeah, and everybody's. Oh, she's like this. She's like my. Jim and I are always creating characters like my sister. My sister's like a tough, very smart, whip-smart New Yorker. And so we're always writing characters like that, but then it's not quite enough because my sister's a real person.
Right.
How about this? How about Iris is dying? How about she's coming to this town and she's dying and she wants to do this podcast because it's her last thing that she wants to do. And she's hiding it from everybody, right? So that can be a big reveal, right? She never would have gotten sent on this thing, but she wants to solve this mystery for some reason. It could just be professional. It could be something. And she's dying, and what she finds out is the supernatural thing is potentially her cure, or it does cure her in the first episode, and now she needs to find out why, right?
Okay.
All right. Now, the reason I throw this out, this could be totally terrible and wrong, is that I'm just trying to turn it all up from a 6 and a 7 in terms of intensity to a 10.
When you were saying that, Sam, you had me wondering is if, there's a world where she knows that this high school person is in this town and she takes this particular assignment because she recognizes the name and it's someone who wronged her in high school or she wronged in high school. Or,
and what does she want to do? Does she want to kill her?
She wants to kill her or she wants to make it up to her before she dies because it turns out that Gabe is the friend from high school's brother. or brother-in-law.
Or she bullied that woman.
Something, right. And there's just something, there's some drive that's bringing her into this particular situation with fervor.
Right. And by the way, as we've said before and is clear in this moment, we need to not be afraid to suck, which is why it's so easy.
Clearly we are not afraid of that.
So, but the thing is, Campy, you got to give yourself a 10 out of 10 of intensity on this point, because this is the gift that you will give to future Campy, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever it is. It can't be she's a little neurotic, she's a little unsure of herself, but she's covering that. These are all nice things, by the way, and these can be totally be consistent with the idea that she's here to kill someone, or that she's here because she's dying, or that she's here because something big like that. That's what we're living with. Not that she's dying. We're living with she's neurotic, she's this, whatever those things are.
That's the scene-to-scene reality of the character.
Right. But the drive has to come from that intense thing. And if it's not, you're going to struggle. I think, because you're not going to have her drive's going to be kind of soft.
Well, what is she being prevented from getting? What is she succeeding in getting closer to?
Yeah.
And it's more than just the disappearance of Cave, because that is the outside measure.
External. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's all external. It's not the internal thing that she's living with.
Unless, and that's why, I would say she bullied someone. Another one, she's a terrible person. She killed somebody. Mm-hmm. And take it to 10.
Right.
Or take it to 11 on all this stuff. And then you can always dial it back. You can always make it grounded, but more grounded. You can always, but just take it there. Don't, we're not, especially with this thing, it's a half hour, man. We don't have a lot of time. We got to get story out.
I'll pitch you something else shitty just to let it suck for a second. But I was thinking about Sam's thing of she's dying. What if she looked at whatever? There's a cancer map of the United States, and for some reason in this town, nobody has the kind of cancer she has. Nobody, ever.
Right.
In the past 40 years, and she can't figure out why. She goes there. Wait, there's this mysterious lab making stuff, and there's other weird people here. There's, I don't know, the sky glows purple at 1 a.m. every day. Whatever the fuck it is, right? She's trying to get to the bottom of what's going on here and why people don't get her cancer. And is there something here that could cure her?
Right.
That would give her a reason to be digging around and talking to everybody.
Or she doesn't care about her podcast. She doesn't give a shit about Gabe and Steve and this mystery. She's actually looking for something else. Why is there no cancer in this town? Or why has there never been a single case of this cancer in town? Whatever, using that and then someone agrees to help her figure that out, but only if she solves the Steve and Gabe problem or whatever. Right. Or her editor says, I'm taking you out of that town, and she unless you give me some. So she's got to do that.
But it's personal drive, personal stakes.
Yep. It's all about that. I think if you used it, if you just thought about, I have to tell this story at a dinner party with all your imaginary Seattle friends, Vancouver friends that you
Seacouver friends.
allegedly have.
My Seacouver pals.
Right. Yeah. We don't know that you have all these interesting
I have some Seacouver friends myself. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Campy could
have
gone
girlfriend's from Seacouver.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, you would know her. She goes to high school in Seacouver.
Right. My girlfriend lives in Canada. But
well, what if the missing person was somebody she dated in high school?
Why does she want him? Don't give me a 7, Campy.
Because I don't know. I was just thinking if she's more, it's easier in my head, I guess, to personally align the stakes of the mystery. Maybe she doesn't care as much about the podcast, but she's doing it as a way to find out what happened.
He's the guy who loved her for her true self before she buried her true self to be ambitious for the sake of satisfying her father, right? And now she wants to find him in the hope of finding the guy who could maybe be her true love.
Right.
Yeah. Something like that. It's still not driving enough, but it's getting there. It's getting there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, I think that clicks a little bit.
I mean, the reason when Jim and I are writing, and a lot of shows that we read or are working on, it's always like she's coming to town because the real reason she was raped by this guy, and that kind of thing always works because it's so intense, and of course she wants revenge or an answer or put him in jail or whatever, and then these shows get dark.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not
too dark.
Right. And you want a dramedy.
Yeah. This guy had the recipe for the best onion dip she's ever had in her life. Right. And she wants to find it if it's going to kill her.
Well, I kind of feel like that's where we started.
Right. No, Cthulhu dip? Why did you call it that?
Yeah, what I'm saying is, all right, don't dork out on me yet. Hold on just a sec. If she's coming in, and to go back to the dying thing, and I'm not repitching, I'm just saying to illustrate it. If she comes in and she's dying, that's the pathos. But then when she's charming and neurotic in places, that's the comedy. And the mix of those two things is dramedy, and it's great. It's great. You know, even Ted Lasso, which is obviously going for more jokes, they did this beautiful thing with Ted Lasso. I don't know if you saw it. I hope you did because it's great.
Oh, yeah, I did.
And the thing that was great was that his wife left him. And he wanted her back, and she came. And then they didn't give us the resolution of that. And she said, I love you, but I don't love you. And that was it. And that was the money. And then he slept with that other woman because he was so sad. And meanwhile, all the crazy stuff's happening. All the jokes are happening. And that, to me,
but there was the emotional spine for the entire season.
Right. And that's why I like the dying thing. Right. That's instant pathos. So if we can find, or not pathos, it doesn't have to be pathos, but that instant emotional
There's
stakes.
Powerful emotional stakes.
Yeah. And that'll make it. So when you're sitting at the dinner table and you're like, oh, what are you working on? I'm working about a woman that's actually doing a podcast, and what nobody realizes is she's there for a different reason. She's dying. And then that's a lean-in moment, right? It's a shortcut.
Right.
And I'm not pitching you do that, but if you have that moment where it's in 5 words like that, she's dying, which somehow I made into 5 words. But if you can do that, then future Campy has a much easier go of it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I can see. If it's not that, it has to be something at least on that level of personal stake.
Yeah, and it's Campy-ish, kind of, sort of. I mean, I've said those words before. It's got to be no, it's real. It's this. And then you can have all those lovely elements that you had, the ones that serve that. The ones that serve that and her, those are the ones you keep. The ones that don't, you put a bullet in their head. And do not look back. Because you'll come up with more of those, clearly.
That resonates with me, yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying there.
All right.
Campy, you see, you started out with the pathos. This is why I went to it, because you're allergic to Christmas. And so the only thing I could think of that was worse than being allergic to Christmas is dying.
This is the one town in America where no one is allergic to Christmas, and she's come here to try and cure her allergy.
We're going to end with as many bad ideas and jokes as we possibly can to make the earlier stuff sound smarter. But thank you, Campy. This is really cool.
Well, cool.
You've got a lot of great stuff going on, and I think you're thinking about things really clearly.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you talking to me. I feel like it was a little earlier on in the process than some of the other guests, and I feel like I am getting a lot out of where I need to go as I develop it.
Good. No, and we like that. Thank you. But we like the idea of talking to people at different stages, because there's just different problems. And Jim and I,
there's always another problem as you go from stage to stage.
Jim and I finally finished the script we were working on, and he just sent in the final. No typos. Our agent found like 2 typos. We fixed them. They're in, and it's sort of done. And it was 12-ish drafts and 3 complete reconceptions, and there's been so many stages to it. So it never ends. It never ends.
Yeah, it's the process. Yeah,
it's the process.
I really appreciate it, guys.
Thanks,
awesome.
Campy.
Thanks, Campy. Good luck.
Be well.
And that's all we've got for you this week. Our producer, J.R. Zamora-Thal, is working the mixing board.
Our logo was designed by Julien Debar-Monclair, and our music was provided by Buddha-Rays out of Austin, Texas.
If you want to get in touch, we are at The Sam and Jim on Instagram and Twitter, and you can find us on Facebook and YouTube as The Writers' Room with Sam and Jim.
And if you like hanging out in the room with us, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And tell a friend, would you, so we can get JR paid. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.